Go on.
Anyways, welcome to the podcast. That probably won't make it into the podcast. Our
Darn.
previous conversation about avocados. But I am clearly welcome my guest, the plushy avocado, and with Frankie. Uh,
Hello.
and we're just here to. We've been friends for a little. I think about 2 years at this point. I think we're just kind of when I
I
met
think
you
way longer.
way longer.
Yeah, you sent me stuff like to our apartment in Chicago.
Hmm.
Yeah, we've been together for almost 4 years, and you've been
Yeah.
sending us stuff to Chicago way beyond that. So
Hmm.
yeah, so at least a long time. I want to say at least 5 years. We've been friends. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've known each other through airsoft, and this is like a. It's because since it's like 5 years at this point, it's like a different Bryan and a different life almost in the
It
middle.
really is. I'm
Yeah.
I'm like I don't even recognize my old like hobbies anymore. It's just so different. Yeah.
Well, I think now at this point, it's like we're all just kind of adulting and living our lives, and like I think it was very interesting that you and Callie had moved back probably right before the pandemic, right?
It was very jarring.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like literally right after you finished up your schooling in Chicago. And so for folks on our podcast, besides just being my friend, Frankie, I wanted to bring Frankie on to discuss some of the things that's been happening with anti-Asian hate, and then just kind of coronavirus in general, like how you've been kind of dealing with it, and just kind of keep it casual because it's like we're just kind of like adults trying to live our lives. Like I don't like for me, I'm more closely tied to like the activism end of it, but I think for you, you're just trying to like work and like make a living sort
Yeah.
of situation. So I just want to preference audience if like in the future I will have more deeper conversations um about everything that's been happening, and like it's not that I'm trying to discount what you have to say, because I feel like what you bring to the table is just as valid. Like
Absolutely. Cool.
everybody
Thank
has
you.
their own ideas and how things should be, and we have like lengthy conversations about it, like literally Callie, which Callan, hello, with the little hand off to the side, she was part of our literal like the election day podcast with Kalani. Yeah, so she could probably chime in here and there for folks that remember that podcast. But yeah, just to start, like it's probably the most unideal time to be in California. Um, but I'm sure you probably don't miss the cold of Chicago.
No, we don't. And well, Callie likes the cold. I enjoy it, but I do love my, I guess, beautiful 70-degree prime golfing weather, like it's just perfect out, and it's been really nice recently, other than like, a couple of weeks of just random cold spells. But I mean,
Hmm.
like we had that huge polar vortex that hit Texas recently, and I
Yeah.
am so glad I was not part of that. Like I remember when it was that cold, and we did the whole like the steaming water pot of water out the window challenge thing. That was cool, but like literally you would have to start your car from inside your apartment,
Hmm.
and like for at least 10 to 15 minutes so it warms up, and driving on the roads are just so like bad. I did not miss that at all. Like here, we're
Hmm.
just able to go anywhere we want, any day we want. It's nice.
And I imagine that living in Illinois during a polar vortex, like it's known as the Windy City, or at least the state that has like high winds, because just the way it's set up,
Right.
um, like like the winds that would the cold that would come from the wind. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like
Hmm.
that would feel different from the actual temperature, does it?
Oh yeah. Like it would be 5 degrees, but feels like negative something.
Hmm.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, just to give you an idea, like I would go to clinic. I remember like starting my car, warming it up, but when I jumped in my car, the cushions that you have in your car, they you know, they should feel plush, you know, they
Hmm.
you sit down and you start your car. But for me, it was like the car was already blasting like heater air, but the seats were rock hard. It was like actually hard, like you sat on a
Huh.
board. It was really weird, and it would be so cold. It's just I did not miss that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. Icicle hair. Yeah.
Yeah. As some as somebody that was born in California, I can't imagine dealing with
Right. I think I mean, where's the
that.
coldest place you've been?
Oregon and Washington during the winter. Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that.
But it was a mild winter though. It's not like what had happened in Oregon and Washington. It was like just cold
Right.
for like mild cold. It was
Yeah, so
my
you had a slightly puffier jacket.
yeah. Yeah, my uncle has a house out there, and every time we would go there, it wouldn't necessarily be like snow. Like there would not be snow. And
Right.
then when this past couple weeks, when we had like really cold temperatures in California, up there, you had situations where like roads were closed, and I think this was like a very notable case of like a group of Oregon nurses was like, oh, okay, let's just give the vaccine because like if we're going to be stuck in traffic, these are going to be spoiled, so we're just going to go car to car in blizzard temperatures giving the vaccine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. I would have never believed that. That's
Yeah,
insane.
that
Wow.
happened very recently, but I think this is very interesting. It's like I haven't really had a conversation about Texas and what had happened there, and
Mhm.
the way that it's like the news has came around to talk about Texas, I feel like because of how mismanaged and like how some of the leaders acted, it just I think the spotlight went straight to Texas almost.
Mhm.
And everybody's
Yeah.
trying to figure out what the hell happened, and like with good
Right.
reason, of course, with the how the power is set up, and elected officials apparently thinking it's a good idea to go to Cabo or not Cabo,
Cancun,
fucking
I think.
Mexico, Cancun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thinking it was a good idea to do that. And then when they came back, or he came back, it was like he didn't even quarantined. And then he did a presser where he was like, here's a box of Dasani water.
Oh my God. I didn't even know he did all that.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
There was
No,
a
yeah,
whole. Mhm.
the whole Texas it was just bad. Like all it was a failure on so many parts, but it just goes to show that yeah, it just goes to show that we get it. America's, like you can't get more American than Texas, really. You
Mhm.
think of freedom and you think of, independence from government
Mhm.
oversight.
Right.
You want to run things your way, which I'm totally for, as long as you could do it, you know, responsibly.
Or
And
be very measured because like if you do a full tilt like no government oversight of anything, you get a situation like this. But
right, exactly.
if you over govern, then like nothing gets done. So like,
Right,
what's
right,
that balance? Like, what should a government be involved with, or what can be privatized, and like
right,
vice
right,
versa? I
right.
think over the FCC and the whole internet situation, like I forgot what it was, but it was like a net neutrality when all of
Right.
that would
Yeah.
happen. It's like when a service becomes so ubiquitous within a culture, within a country, within a political system, then does it make sense to hand it off to an organized government, or does it make better sense to keep it privatized? So like
Right.
what's the
I
give and
think
take
there's
there?
got to be
Yeah.
a balance, and I do not speak with any authority or
Of
any
course,
like
yeah.
understanding of it, but I would say you got to have a balance because just like you were saying, too much of either side would just it would be either too uncontrollable or too like way down and like yielding. Like you can't work it anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
just impossible. I think the sad part is just like in Texas, it was the common folk who suffered. It wasn't the
Yeah.
guy who could afford to fly his, kids out to Cancun. It was the everyday person who would be stuck there
Mm-hmm.
5 days without electricity and without an ability to warm themselves. So
Yeah.
I think a bunch of people died. A
Mm-hmm.
huge amount. Like imagine surviving coronavirus just to die to a freak snow snap, like a cold snap. And it's crazy. Like I couldn't believe that that happened in Texas of all places because it's so far south. It's
Mm-hmm.
like all the way down there, but it reached down there. Like the polar vortex geographically reached all the way down there, and they just didn't have the infrastructure to support the demand.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so sad because like literally states neighbor. I watched a Vox video about this
Of course, it
literally
would be a
this
Vox
morning.
video. Me and Callie
Yeah,
always
I
said that.
watched it
Of
this
course.
morning, so
Yeah.
I am educated. No, but it was so good because I was like, wow, so all these other states, obviously, when this polar vortex came down there, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like these other states didn't get hit by it, but they did, but they were part of a grid that allowed them to, siphon energy from other states, and they
Mm-hmm.
were able to keep their citizens warm and safe. Whereas Texas, because of its, you know, off the grid, I guess you would call grid,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't able to do that, and it was just it cost a lot of people their lives, and that
And
really sucks.
and it's like a very short-sighted sort of proposition there, because it's like the I guess in the mind of our lizard brains, where we think that, oh, Texas equals heat, Texas equals like
Right.
desert, right?
Barbecue.
And barbecue and like live music, right? Especially in
Right.
Austin. But because there's this notion that it's always going to be that warm, there's no insulation on pipes, and building is cheaper there, but there's a cost, there's a hidden cost to all of that, the on
Right.
regulations, and and the standards for plumbing and electricity.
Right.
So like
And house
for
infrastructure, like they're built so like cheap because they don't have to be as insulated as
Mhm.
houses in other states.
Right.
Yeah.
And that this happens. That's why everybody's freezing to death
Right.
because
Well, what really boggled me was the fact that when once again, I'm stating, so my reference is the Vox video. I'm not gonna say Wikipedia. Like I'm not making this up. They cited this, but they said this has happened before in
Mhm.
1980 something, and
Mhm.
it was before I was born, so I have no experience over it. But like politicians and scientists and officials had knowledge that this has happened before,
Mhm.
and if history can repeat itself. It's not like the winters are going to get warmer only. They can get extremely cold and they can reach really far down. So
Mhm.
I think, I mean, this all comes back to climate change and everything else as well, but it just sucks that they were so unready for
Mhm.
this, that it just, yeah, so unprepared that it cost people lives. It would have just been like, oh, like, they ran out of energy for a day, but then people were able to figure out how to get energy back, and that was it. Like it was damages and people were cold for a day. No, it was cold for 5 days. People
Yeah.
had to melt ice in their pipes to get them, just to flush their toilet, just to get drinkable water because they couldn't leave. It was crazy. I was like, wow.
people are running out of food.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
it was a it was a disaster, and I couldn't believe that actually happened.
Yeah, it's weird to like live through so many events that are like that where
Mhm.
it's just crazy to witness.
Right.
Like we're not there or anything, so I can't imagine what it's like to have been in Texas at the time. But just watching it happen is crazy. Like how many once in a lifetime events can you live through? Right?
Right.
We're
I
gonna
think it's an exercise in, for folks on the outside, watching a country like the United States kind of deal with this. It's like it's it's a test bed for like the world, because each state more or less governs itself. Of course that there is the federal government, on top of everything,
Right.
but each state either opts in or opts out, and Texas was, I guess, the only state that opts out within the lower 48.
Right.
So I think the thing that's also kind of that I feel like it's overlooked a little bit about Texas, because it's been kind of abhorrent, like the way things were managed, and the amount of people that passed away through both just the cold and like all the stuff that would happen because of the cold. Like I think days or a week before the huge cold snap, like I think 15 people died with like 100 car plus pileup on like
Yeah.
I-15, or like the state route that they have there. And it's like these things will happen, and that, yeah. And what I was trying to get at for my initial point is that it kind of took away from like states like Mississippi and like all of these other states that was in the vicinity of that cold snap. And like there are other states that are dealing with water issues that came from that cold snap that Texas had to deal with. And
Right.
and
People died in all the states, Ohio, Tennessee. People were dying all over, but everybody eyes were all on Texas. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, all eyes on this one state that I guess was more mismanaged than I guess the other states. But
Right.
yeah,
It just sucks, like you can't, you have no way of defending what happened because they had info about it possibly happening, and like literally I actually watched the Fox interview between Hannity and what's it called, or what's his name, the official who flew to Cancun, Ted
Oh,
Cruz,
Ted
sorry.
Cruz, yes.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, right, he was just like Hannity was just like leading him, was like, oh yeah, you tried so hard, and you did your job, and like you coming back here, like that's really admirable, like blah blah blah. I was like, man, you're just not, you're throwing softballs, you're drawing the narrative, you're not even asking questions. So it sucks because we know which side they're on, the right side, and they're like, yeah, there's no global warming and there's no climate change, and what we're doing here, yes, it was a disaster, but it wasn't my fault, like I had to come back because now I feel like I have a duty to fulfill, for my state, but coming back here afterwards as an afterthought, it's just bad luck all around. It just didn't work out well. I feel like there's just no way for us to, I guess, redeem any of their actions.
Well, I think that's the yeah, we can point to that and say that's a bad look too. I think the biggest thing is also like, what do you sign up for as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely.
AOC raised like $1 million, didn't she?
Yeah.
For Texas?
Yeah.
Like Ted Cruz is a fucking
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Those are her
No cussing.
those are her responsibility, but she saw people suffering, and as an elected leader, she stepped out and did something about it.
Right.
Instead of flying out of the country.
Right.
And
Okay,
she's
now we're going into like, okay, bipartisanship versus partisanship stuff. Yeah, right. Right. Well, I'm just saying this is gonna segue into bipartisan and non-bipartisan stuff about our country.
In terms of just pointing out leadership, and also the if folks didn't hear, Callie was referencing AOC, a representative from New York, a completely different state coming in and raising money. But there was a comment that was made through Joe Rogan's podcast. It's like, oh, what is Ted Cruz supposed to do? Well, what is he supposed to do as a senator? To come by and kiss babies and like just politic? It was all, well, no. As a leader, you're supposed to either at the very bare minimum comfort your constituents, and on another end would provide services or allocate funds or do something that is tangible for those communities that are suffering the most, like folks like AOC, right? Or Beto and local in Texas. Like they did something to better the conditions of the people living in those states. And I've had to talk to some family members about that. I was like, well, he was planning in this vacation already. Well, look, it's besides the fact that basically the neighbors ratted them out and just said, hey, look at this, look how kind of an asshole they were. Besides that fact is like when you're as a leader and there's a tragedy or like a world changing event for your constituents, you got to do something. and
Right.
leaving your state to go to another country for a vacation is not that something.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it seems pretty typical of what a seditionist would do because I mean, he is a leader, but he literally was part of the crowd that said, you know, we don't believe that election results are
Mhm.
accurate. Like these were not accurate, and I have no proof of why they're not, but they're not accurate, and I'm just gonna keep arguing that even after they verify everything, after Mike Pence signs it, after your party's VP signs it, and he's still like, yeah, no, like,
Yeah.
and the best he could do, like what you were saying, like what can that leader do? He could step down. Yeah,
Mhm.
he could step down. That's resign and become and give someone else who is fit for that
Mm.
position. That yeah, like that's the easiest thing he can do because
Mhm.
yeah, he was completely useless. I feel like yeah, the least. I mean, he could do
Well,
more. But
well, yeah, that's also bringing in the whole seditionists and like the basically rubbing Trump's back when, you know, all of what had happened in January 6th, he's basically exonerating a president that
right,
incited a riot. But
right,
I think on the other end of that, this whole movement to recall Gavin Newsom, and when I had a conversation with family about comparing Ted Cruz and like what he could done, well, think about what other leaders that has the best intentions.
mhm,
You got to imagine if you don't do anything, you get Ted Cruz. But if you do a lot and you're trying to listen to as many experts as many folks as you can, like Gavin Newsom, like for him to do nothing, that's a bad look on him. For him to do as much as he can, that's another bad look on him. So as a leader, what are you gonna do?
right, right. I think in the long term, in the best way to look at it is you have to do what's good for
Mm-hmm.
everyone, like the overarching good. You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna you're not gonna please every single person, and
Mm-hmm.
certain factions are never gonna be happy. But
Mm-hmm.
what is the best thing for everyone? It has to be obviously be based on scientific data and by experts. Like you listen to them and you weigh the outcomes. If you open too early, people are gonna die. If you close down everything, people are going to die because they have no way to feed their families. Like
Right.
you have to find a balance. And where do you allow people to work? Where do you allow it to reopen? What numbers are we looking at? It's a huge undertaking to crunch those things. But it's always, I guess, safer to err on the side of safety
Mm-hmm.
and be like, let's stay closed a little bit longer. And we're in the 21st century. I feel like there's ways for people to get aid to to our communities. We're not gonna like completely starve. Like, sure, mom and pop stores will shut down. They will run out of business, and it sucks. Like, we're not saying it doesn't suck. It's obviously it sucks that
Mm-hmm.
businesses run out, and it's not his fault. It's not him trying to be like, I want all of these businesses. I want AMC to like run out of business. I want malls to close down. It's not like Democrats govern like Governor Gavin Newsom wants to like make life harder for us. It's him trying to protect us and save our lives. That's the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
But he's doing these things where people are looking at it and they're like, "Well, I want to eat out with my friends." And why is that a bad thing? Like I hate this guy. Let's recall him because he's affecting my life. And it's like, no, you got to think more than just about yourself. And I guess this is the whole argument because
Mm-hmm.
in the end it's about selfishness or selflessness. Can you put others ahead of yourself? And that's what this pandemic really showed. Like there are a lot of people who cannot do that. They put themselves ahead of everyone else, and they're risking the lives of so many, and that's probably why we still have such a high infection rate. Like we're just there's a huge faction of us who don't listen and don't follow like rules, and we just can't get this disease under control. I mean, I'm sure the scientists at the CDC are literally trying every day to try
Mm-hmm.
and figure out why is the number still so high and why is every other country like dropping or plateauing or drop, and they're just doing much better than us. And it sucks that it's taking us more. We're at a year now. This is
Mm-hmm.
March again, so So it's crazy how we haven't moved forward as a country. And it just goes to show, like you were saying, states govern themselves. And I think that's, it comes down to the culture in each state, and people within that state don't listen to like our state, California, just has so many people who don't like Gavin Newsom. And then there's people who like him, but also like dislike the fact that he reopened again. Like, oh, he
Mm-hmm.
closed down, awesome, but then he reopened. Oh, I hate him. It's like you can't do anything to please anyone. But it's it's the thought, I guess, the idea behind it, why he was doing it in the first place. It's to save
Mm-hmm.
lives, and we all knew. Like you could tell, people are dying left and right. It sucks.
I think.
California has such a huge economy, and we have so many people, but
Mhm.
it's everyone's dying because we're open.
Yeah, and we're such a big economy to the point that we can also, on top of the proposed 1,400, give another 600 for folks that need it, right?
Yeah.
Like there is, I think, just past like a week or so, I haven't really got an update, but
Yeah.
like where we have a big enough economy where we can do that.
Right.
And for the conversation about leadership, when it was proposed that there was going to be a recall of Gavin Newsom, the first time I saw that was sometime in August when we're driving down a car from Seattle. But then what's the alternative? What's the alternative to Gavin Newsom? Like, we've seen other states go through it. We've seen other states that handled it, and we've seen other states that didn't handle it. Then if you're saying that in California is too restrictive, then what's the alternative?
Right.
How many
Well,
people?
the alternative is
Yeah.
we're back in Texas because that's what their governor just did. I think 2 days ago they decided to open the whole state.
In
Everything's
addition to
open.
other states like what, South Carolina and like
Mhm.
some of these, it's not strictly southern states, but like there are states right now, and I think the most northern one is Montana, that said like, yeah, we're not doing it. We're not doing mask anymore in Montana. So
Mhm. I just don't know
Yeah.
what they're expecting because it's not like everyone's vaccinated in Texas all of a sudden. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't like there was a carpet bomb of the vaccines on all the communities. There's still
Mhm.
people who can carry it and are probably carrying it. And so you open this whole thing up and everyone decides, oh, well, the governor says we're good to go. Maybe there are people, a faction of people who are like, I'm going to stick with my common sense. I'm going to wear a mask.
Mhm.
I'm going to socially distance. But there's going to be people who are like, finally, we get to do what we've all been waiting.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you. Oh, so what, is that like a
I think
Bluetooth?
my headphone
Okay.
just turned off. I don't know why.
It's not like we were idle or anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I touched anything.
Okay. Well, wouldn't it be a better conspiracy than now that you mentioned carpet bombing, that the snow was a vaccine that vaccinated all of, like, from Montana all the way down to Texas? I would rather have that conspiracy than Bill Gates apparently colluding with China to make fake snow. So I would rather have.
From the
Ooh.
Jewish space lasers.
Yeah, we're trying to hide that space laser. They can't see through the snow, can they?
Oh gosh.
You believe in the moon?
But it's funny about Texas reopening because on that same day they had the headline that I think Austin had every known COVID variant. Like that was the first day they had officially like notified that.
Right.
So it was really like people saw those two headlines like side by side. Like Austin officially has every single known COVID variant, and also Greg Abbott is reopening the state
Right.
with 0 masks, and everyone's
Right.
just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think Callie like literally looked it up as soon as she saw the headline that he was reopening, and she was like, "Wait a minute!" And she
No, I
looked
was
up
just looking
graphs.
into it.
Yeah, she looked up graphs, and she's like, "Look at this graph," and it's like right when they're like coming back up.
The country as a whole had been plateauing in cases, but that's not happening anymore. I think the trend is going upward again, but the country as a whole had been plateauing in cases for a few weeks, and Texas itself had been increasing in cases.
Right.
They're just like, all right, fuck the mask.
Right. No cussing.
It's like it's playing the worst version of Endgame and and like Avengers, like instead of getting the Infinity Stones, it's getting all the variants.
Yeah, it's like collecting them all like Pokemon.
Yeah, they got all the variants. Gotta catch them all.
So now that we are tangentially going back to the whole coronavirus conversation, and there's been, you know, ever since the conversation I had with the housing advocate, the Japanese American housing advocate, Eric Sonata, we've known that if we politicize the pandemic, right, and calling it these names like the China virus or Kung flu or all of these derogatory statements that pertains it to a geographic location or pins it on a group of people, right?
Hmm.
I think recently more and more there's been attacks against Asian Americans and specifically Asian American elderly
Right.
people, and this has been kind of been the thing that scares me a lot lately because I have a family that has since like retired and moved back with me. You know, like how am I going to put?
Congrats to them.
Yeah,
Congrats to them.
congrats to them. What a hell of a time to retire, by the way.
Right. Right.
But you know, I want them to enjoy their retirement. You know, so
Hmm.
like I've done the things of like get them their vaccine and you know try my best to like make sure that they're good. But now they're having to deal with this other aspect of this virus that the hate against Asian Americans and quite frankly it's just been escalating, you know, to a point, and I feel terrible about this, but like I think for you and me, like I felt, well, I'm not trying to speak for you, but for us that live in the San Gabriel Valley, like we
Right.
felt like we were sheltered. We live in this very multicultural space, and
Right.
you know, like almost like half and half Asian and Chicano, and like in the middle of all of that, white, black, and like anything else you could think of, right?
Right.
But it wasn't until like a teacher within the Rosemead area, right? He was assaulted and lost part of his finger. And he's a teacher in an elementary school. And like it really affected me because I was just like, you know, that could have been my dad. It could have been my mom. And,
Right.
you know, these random acts like really scares me. And I try to tell people it's like, yeah, or like, oh, Mr. Kim's like you're just saying this because you know it's getting closer to you. It's like, well, yeah, like you thought you would think that you would be safe in a multicultural area until something were to happen to you.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you wouldn't think in terms of like, oh, like I'm gonna be super paranoid until something happens. Like that's just human nature. So how have you been, you know, dealing with this? I know you do have elderly individuals in your families. Like how have they been?
Yeah, I do, but you know, my circumstances are not even like, I guess, that dangerous in a sense because my grandmother mainly stays at home. She
Mm-hmm.
never leaves the house. Any shopping and stuff that needs to be done is either with my brother or my mother, who's able to be with her. So she's generally with other people, and I feel like these attacks are mostly like solo attacks. You're looking
Mm-hmm.
for a single target, and you're not going to attack a group of people because
Mm-hmm.
then you risk getting overrun. So I I don't feel like she's in danger. And my grandfather, who's also elderly, he's in a long-term care facility at this point. So he's fine. He's out of the way, and there's people taking care of him. So I I have been removed from this situation quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I read about it and I'm just so like I'm angered, obviously. I'm hurt and
Mm-hmm.
angered, but I'm also in a sense confused because it's not like doing any. I mean, these actions don't do anything. Like
Mm-hmm.
I see I kind of had the idea that okay, this was happening during Chinese New Year, right around that cusp, because you're assuming these older men or women might be carrying more money on them. than usual. And if you were to jump them and mug them and take their belongings, you have a higher chance of scoring bigger money,
Mhm.
than, just a random person on the street. So I can see why right around Chinese New Year you might target Asian Americans or just Asians in general,
Mhm.
because you just have that concept that they will carry more money and you might have a higher chance of a payout. But now that it's like past that time, it feels like it's a fad. It feels like everyone's just doing it because everyone else is doing it, and it blows my mind because there are these people who have that hate in them, and they're just like, I can't channel it anywhere else, but I want to channel it to this old guy walking down the street.
Mhm.
I'm gonna push him over and fracture his hip or his skull, whatever, and I'm gonna rob this lady. And what the link you sent me about that Buddhist temple in Little Tokyo, LA, it just didn't make sense. Like, who goes through the effort of jumping a gate
Mhm.
and then desecrating multiple parts of the temple and then just leaving?
Mhm.
Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. There's got to be some kind of like motive there. There's
Mhm.
got to be something there to gain other than like, oh, I'm destroying things for destruction's sake.
Mhm.
So it's hard for me to understand it because you would have to be dissecting their psyche to figure out like, why did you do this? Like, it makes sense to rob someone who might have more money because they would be like, oh, I get to, if I hit every Asian person and they all carry $1,000 and I made it cool 5,000 if I hit 5 people. But it's like, now it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna beat up on old people, like just running up on them, beating them up. It's crazy. um and it sucks that there's such a, I don't know, it's almost like there was coverage about it. I saw it on the news, but
Mhm.
not much is being done, and it's hard for me to. I mean, have you seen the Asian community like rallying? I've seen, influencers like post about stuff like that, celebrities and stuff.
Yeah, the Daniel Day
Like,
Kims and
right. That
of the
was really
worlds.
cool. But it's, I don't know. This is turning out almost to me like it's fading into the background itself already. Just like
I
how Asians in general fade into the background. Like, we stand by and we watch atrocities happen. We don't jump in. It's that mom mentality. We don't offer help. If someone
Mhm.
gets beat up, we're not gonna like go in and beat the attacker. We're not going to shoo him away. We just kind of watch. And now, like, obviously the outpouring of support was really good, but now it's kind of fading back into obscurity again.
Like, what's
And
the
it's
next steps on that?
right, and it
Mhm.
it just makes me wonder, like, is this just going to happen again every year, and is it going to be a cycle, or is this
Mhm.
just going to be, I mean, hopefully not like chronic, like just literally every week we just see more and more of this happening, because I don't know why this is happening now. If this was based on coronavirus, it would have happened earlier. It would have happened last year. But why now? Why January? Why February? It just, to me, doesn't tick all the boxes, and I'm not too sure. I mean,
Well,
it could be gang
I've
related. It could be like initiative.
yeah, and all of those, everything and everything in between can be true. Yeah,
Right.
like, gang affiliation and like the Arkham Razors in this conversation, like the explanation that could be the most simplest to answer this complicated stream of like
Right.
anti-Asian hate, which is purely racism, as in the case for, well, it's still being investigated as a hate crime, but like with desecrating a temple, like that has meaning.
Mm-hmm.
That has a tinge of like, oh, this is important to you, this religion is important to you, then we're going to do something to attack that religion. you
Right.
know the um I follow it very closely, but mostly because that's the work I do. Like, I
Right.
inhabit that space a lot. I talk to high school students about racism and about how to, get away from this anti-black, mindset. And you'll be very surprised how many people of Asian descent have anti-blackness views. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, what the hell is going on here? But then
Right.
again, I live in like a bubble, at some times, and I need to acknowledge that to some degree, I, by the bare fact of the news I consume, the people that I've interact with, like, I do live in some form of bubble. And so
Right.
I do have this frame that I see it, even at the very beginning of coronavirus when he was starting to call it Kung Flu. And when in El Paso, I think a Southeast Asian family was like sliced up by
Right.
um, in a parking lot of a Walmart, right? And
Right. Yeah.
under normal circumstances, that would just be a normal day at a Walmart parking lot. But during a pandemic, and basically one of the reasons that the guy did it is like it has a racial tint to it.
Hmm.
So I may be skewed because I follow it, like news bite to news bite. But to be fair, not everybody is going to inhabit themselves in that world or in that kind of like, how do we address anti-Asian bias, right?
Right.
There
Right.
are people, there are minor celebrities away from the Daniel Day Kims of the world and those celebrities that people are doing the work, but I have that same fear you do. It's like at some point people are going to forget.
Right.
People are not going to recognize this, and I don't know what's the answer to it. I always default back to education,
Right.
teaching
Yeah.
our history, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah. This the most difficult part of it is finding a like a fix all solution in a sense,
Mhm,
because you don't want this to continue, but how do you reach the other side? How do
mhm,
you reach across and be like and figure out, namely, like, why are you doing this? What is motivating you to do this? And how can we rectify it? Because we're clearly not, like, Asians are not going out there to attack people. Like,
mhm,
you're not seeing a bunch of Asian people like literally mobbing up on African American, elderly African Americans, elderly Latinos, Latinx. There's just it's just not, reciprocating. So if it's not a race war, and it's not like us trying to harm them directly, we're doing our own thing. We're literally walking down the street and
mhm,
we get sucker punched, we get knocked out, we get killed. Like,
mhm,
it doesn't make sense. Why is this happening?
mhm,
And I I feel like that's the most hard thing to figure out right now. Like, what is the solution? What is the fix all solution? And will it go away? And I don't know if it will. That's what's really scary. Like, one day I'm gonna be an old dude walking down the street. Will I be just taken out by some random, person who decides, like, I really hate Asians. I'm gonna kill this old guy walking down the street who's
mhm,
just strolling along. Like,
mhm,
that really sucks. And you're not surrounded by your family. You just got robbed by everything that you probably hope you know, the way you want to go is. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Do you have any input?
I mean, I don't know. I feel more detached from the situation than you do. Obviously, like I can see it. I recognize that it's awful, and I think it's just insane that like, especially targeting elderly people is just bananas to me. Like
Right. The most vulnerable sect of
we've
people.
been going through a thing the past few days, watching a lot of Netflix documentaries. So
Right.
we're like talking a lot about like society's most vulnerable. And I don't know, I get really emotional when I talk about it because it's like to know to seek out a person you know is more vulnerable than you are. It's like picking on someone, like pick on someone your own size type of thing.
Right.
Like to pick on someone, to assault, to stab, to
Yeah. They're
jump.
just predatory.
Yeah, it's
mhm,
But
just insane. Like to even that thought that goes through their minds that says
yeah.
like I should attack an old person today.
Right.
Like I can't even understand that.
Right. And that goes back to the psyche thing. Like, why does that happen?
Right.
mhm,
Why? I mean, to the easy answer is money. Like, if I could rob them, but it's not all robberies. Some of them
mhm.
are just literal attacks. They
Yeah.
just kill the person, they knock them down, and they sustain heavy injuries, and then they end up passing. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you and me had a conversation about like, and this is literally veering into conspiracy theory territory, but like if people are attacking Asian people, elderly Asian people, any Asian people, whatever, and like trying to create a division between races, because I have seen so many people like And you know how the internet is. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
lies. Everyone makes fake profiles and stuff like that. But like I watched a TikTok one day, and it was an Asian, like younger guy, 20s maybe, teenager, I don't know. And he's doing this weird, exaggerated like black accent sort of, and he's saying like, where are all the Asians who stood up for BLM when Asian people are being attacked? And I was like, right here, like on my news feed, I see plenty of Asian people that are trying to draw attention to the attacks. But he was saying like, why would you be there for BLM and not for when Asians are being attacked? And I was just like, well, everyone in the responses, the person who posted it, etc., everyone was like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you even post this? Like, what's going through your head when you do that? Because a lot of people, it seems like, are trying to divide.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to use attacks, and they say like, oh, like this elderly Asian person was attacked by a Latino man. You know, like let's start something between Asians and Latinos. And I'm just like, why would you do that?
Right.
Like, don't feed into that, especially.
Right.
Do not do that. Like,
And I think especially on top of that there are some, you know, Asian communities that already buy into that, like the anti-blackness, anti-black and brown people. And at the same time, we are the brown people that we talk about, especially me, with like me being like a little brown Asian guy, you know,
right.
like not traditional
I
in
can
this.
get brown too. I just gotta sit in the sun a little longer.
Yeah.
I have darker skin-ish.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, if we start having that conversation, or like that notion that, oh, because like because black people are doing this to Asian people, and Latino or Latinx people are doing it to Asian people, it's like, why are we trying to label it? Like, why can't we just say, hey, this full tilt, this abuse of Asian Americans, like that just needs to stop?
Right. Like,
you know?
Yeah. And it's the whole like, oh, if you care about Black Lives Matter, you have to care about these Asian attacks. And I agree, but it's not like people are doing that. They're not saying like, they're not supporting Black Lives Matter and then the next breath saying like, oh, who gives a shit about Asians being attacked? You know, like you can care about two things at once. It's a false equivalency to say that you can only care about one or the other. People who speak out in support of either thing, or like to raise awareness, are probably doing both. You know,
right?
Like
right.
there's, I've not seen a single person who says like Black lives matter but Asian lives don't, or vice versa.
Right.
Like I've not seen that. I've only seen people who say something stupid once and they get like verbally attacked on the internet for saying something stupid, like, you know, well, you know, you care so much about this, then why don't you care about that? You know, like I only see people that are like, what do you like? Why would you even say this? Because there's no one else saying that. You're conjuring up a situation that doesn't exist.
Right.
It's false outrage. Like, don't do that.
Right.
Callie, I know you don't necessarily have a mic, but do you feel like you've been thrust into you know, learning more about, you know, anti-Asian bias and like all of these you know, community of color issues because you know, you met Frankie before, or have you always been interested in understanding people?
It's funny because like before I met Frankie, like most of my friends were Asian, but most of them were Filipino because I just lived in an area with a really high population of Filipino people. But yeah, I mean, I've always like adopted into those cultures, like spending time with my Filipino friends at parties and stuff like that, and like you know, I one time I practiced like tinikling with my friends, like for a thing which is like a Filipino dance with sticks. And like I enjoy, you know, Filipino food, Japanese food. Like I don't stick to my own culture type of thing, you know. I'm trying to say
whatever white may be.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I don't like rebuke other cultures. Is what I'm trying to say. So
yeah.
No, I see like everything happening in the world, and I can absolutely see like I can address race. I'm not one of those people that's gonna say like, oh, I am so colorblind. I don't see race. Like I can see issues that are happening. You can draw a correlation. More Asians are being attacked now. Black people are killed by police at disproportionate rates. Like I can see all of that, and I always have been able to. It's not like, you know, dating Frankie has been like my eye-opening awakening to like the multicultural world.
She was great when I found her.
Yeah, Frankie, like I probably like changed Frankie's views on a
Yeah.
lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've become
Because I'm like
more
the young
liberal.
liberal woman.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Frankie picked up on it
I
better.
was very centrist, very moderate centrist, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm, I guess, this way.
I pushed
Left.
Yeah.
Frankie pretty hard.
Avocado left.
Towards the avocado. And
Right,
it's always better
right,
where the avocado is. And
right.
for I know we were about to run out of time. And
Keep talking. I haven't heard from his brother.
okay.
Yeah, we haven't heard
I
from our people.
I do want to
But
ask Callie this though. Given everything that's been happening over the course of this year in the pandemic, have you ever fear for his safety? Like, you know, of course, you're a dentist, you're operating on people's mouths, and you know, doing with that, and with all of the fear and anxiety that comes with, you know, there's that. But do you feel for his safety when it comes to, you know, he can't change the way he looks. Like I can't change the way I look, you know, as
Yeah,
much
it's
as I
funny you
want to
say
try.
that because I've been thinking about that. Like, I don't know, like a few weeks ago, Frankie said something about like, you know, things might be different or better if we stayed in Illinois. And I just reminded him that one time he was at like a stop sign and these two white guys in a truck or whatever came up next to him and they like yelled, you know, expletives, like slurs. And I'm like, the Midwest is not friendly to Chinese people for whatever reason. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
Midwest is, as hard as it tries to be, kind of ethnocentric at times. Like, it can be, depending on where you are, obviously. And we lived in a white area. My family lived in sort of a white area. It was relatively blended, but not where we lived, you know, like our neighborhood. But I do have that fear, like, and part of it is because Frankie likes to mouth off.
Mm-hmm.
Like Frankie will defend himself, like he'll get aggressive, and that does make me nervous.
but see, and that's another thing. Like, is it? And I'm not saying that it's because I'm an Asian man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we supposed to be okay with racial attacks? You know,
Absolutely not.
like, are we supposed to stand by and let them attack us
Mm-hmm.
versus, putting up a fight?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Yeah, safety matters. Like, I'm not gonna, like, if two guys versus one, maybe I could take them. No, but it's scary because, like, how do you know, like, this situation, can you diffuse it? And obviously you want to diffuse situations. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to fight these guys, I'm going to, you know punch like common sense into them, like, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have fought me. um it's just like, these racial slurs are going to keep coming. You want to educate them, but they're stuck in their ways, like,
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking like, oh, let's make fun of this guy, let's
Mm-hmm.
drive up for no other reason. It doesn't benefit them in any way. Maybe it gives
Mm-hmm.
them an ego boost, like, and they're like, all right,
Yeah,
like, I feel like a big man in my big truck, like, awesome. But it doesn't do anything else other than make you feel good, in a sense, just to put down another human being, and are we supposed to, take it lying down? Are we just supposed to take it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scary thing, because I think, like, Asians are getting to that point. We're trying to figure out our identity in this, because if we don't fight back, the rooftop Koreans, like, oh, we
Mm-hmm.
gotta hold our ground, we gotta protect what's ours. Um, I think we obviously we need to, but
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes like we're the yellow plague. We're the bad guys for standing up against the oppressors, So
Mm-hmm.
it the tint of racism is always going to be there, just because there are races.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
think this problem is that there's no pan humanity yet. Like, we're not that weird, like, mix.
Yeah, blended
The
society.
blended society where everyone is homogenous.
Yeah.
There's gonna be segregation. People want to be with what they're familiar with, their cliques. And we're just, it sucks. Of course, we want people to intermingle. There's got to be globalism. Sharing cultures,
Mm-hmm.
blending things only enhances our society. We're
Mm-hmm.
only gonna get better because we all learn from each other. And I truly believe in that. But there's gonna be sex. There's gonna be people who are gonna be like, no, I just want to make fun of these people. I want to beat them up. I want to hurt them. And I don't know if we're ever. It's funny because we're getting back to. I like reading about like the civilization scale. Will we ever become a star-faring like interstellar species? Will we ever be able to go beyond our our I guess our solar system? Because we're gonna get to Mars, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
the scary thing is like, will we destroy ourselves? Will we ever never get up on the Kardashev scale where
Mm-hmm.
we're unable to work together enough and we end up destroying ourselves? We're one of those societies like if you run a simulation on this planet, these beings get to a certain point where they're about to advance onwards because they could with technology, but they ended up nuking themselves because everyone hated each other and that society ends up becoming extinct. Are we going to be that society? And
Mm-hmm.
that really scares me because seeing how things are, it there's nothing that proves that it's going to be different than that.
Yeah,
We're
like, are
Mm-hmm.
we going forward
right.
really?
I mean, the Cold War was literally just decades ago, like it's scary. We could
Mm-hmm.
have killed each other. And now it's just like everyone's still hating each other. Probably not to the point where we're going to launch nukes, but it's like, are we ever going to unite? Are we ever going to be on common ground and blend and share ideas and
It's like
grow?
Annihilation, right? No, 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 not Annihilation. What's the one called where the aliens come and they
Oh,
land the big spaceship and we all
yeah,
have to
yeah,
learn the
yeah.
language?
Yeah,
Is it captive
oh my
state?
gosh. Huh?
What is it?
Captive state?
No, 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 no.
No, no, not that one.
It's the one movie about the lady. She's a linguist and she's learning alien
Oh,
language.
Arrival.
Arrival.
Arrival,
Yes.
right,
It's just like that. Like what's gonna be our arrival event that
right.
bonds
Mm-hmm.
us together
Which
as
apparently
a
has to be
society?
sci-fi because it's not possible in real life. It has to be sci-fi
Yeah,
because
like.
we're just never gonna come together. Like the one virus that will strip all of our languages. We're unable to communicate. Now we have to join together and work together. Like it's got to be literally fantasy
Mm-hmm.
because it's like when it comes down to it, people don't like each other. They don't like
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with each other. You stick to cliques, and that's that's the problem. You're never gonna step out of like the motivational talk, like get out of your comfort zone, meet people that
Mm-hmm.
will surround yourself with people who will help you grow. Don't surround yourself with yes men, but literally that's everyone. That
Mm-hmm.
is everyone, and it sucks because we're never gonna advance as a society. There's gonna be people who will, um, but I don't think as a society we'll ever move forward without changing that. And when is our arrival event? I don't know. Like,
Or
is it
when will it
possible?
be? Like, yeah, is it possible? That's the
Yeah.
main thing,
What will unite us?
right?
An alien attack.
Because even in real life, if Arrival happened, it wouldn't be portrayed in a movie, and
Right.
it's a high chance it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't. Like we
Right.
wouldn't come together. We would fight until the end.
Right. And the movie. I mean, I don't know if you have you watched that movie, The Arrival.
He knew what we were talking about, so I assume.
I don't. It's been a while. Surprisingly, that movie's been out for like more than 5 years at this point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it's not a new movie.
It's not a
Yeah.
new movie, but there's a spoiler alert. There is a crisis, and we like the world.
Sorry for Arrival spoilers.
Yeah,
If
sorry.
you're
Yeah,
watching.
but people don't want to work together because in the end, people are thinking, "Oh, alien species, there's secrets that we can harness from them." And like in the beginning, all the countries are trying to work together and try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what's going on. But in somewhere along the way, people are starting to distrust each other. Countries are like China pulls out, Russia pulls out, like just knowing how the UN votes, you
Mm-hmm.
can probably see like, oh, certain countries will fall out of communication with the other countries that want to
Mm-hmm.
work together, and people just start, the fear sets in, the unknown sets in,
Mm-hmm.
and it literally isn't until a miracle happens that someone like connects everyone again. And that's what's scary. Like I don't think there's going to be a miracle that's going to happen that connects us. We
Mm-hmm.
have to work together. We have to make a conscious effort.
Mm-hmm.
And will we do that? Unsure because people find it like it's easier to yell slurs from across the highway.
Yeah.
Like that's just like I feel good.
It just means that a Star Trek reality is much more harder than an Expanse reality.
Right. I haven't watched The Expanse, but I heard it's really good. But yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that. Yeah, like we're not we're not gonna get to that point where everyone's gonna be, able to
Right.
grow beyond our boundaries of solar system just because I don't think we'll work together enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I there are some things that I haven't gone over. I don't know if you're still
Go
down to
ahead. No, please. Yeah. We'll let you know.
yeah, just let me know. But in terms we went really into a sci-fi tangent. But
Sorry.
uh but in terms of bringing back the the Asian American community, I think there one of the things that I've really was kind of like reflective is just how I guess we were raised within kind of like the Asian context or like the Asian ideals and like ideas of like being Asian American. And this notion that we have to just stay quiet, like don't cause trouble, or like um and like don't rock the boat at all, right? Like we feel that if we try to ask for a raise, then that's overstepping a bound, right? But in the context of the United States, like that's just something you do, right? You just ask for a raise. And so I think to some degree, and I'm trying to blame Asian Americans, right? Like I'm not trying to victim blame, but like I think we need to address some of the cultural things that we grew up with to start really, you know, understanding and like dealing with the situation of like anti-Asian bias. If we're saying that stop AAPI hate, right? If they're saying that there are 3,000 reported cases, but on top of that, there's more cases that we know that there are out there, but there are people that just refuse to report because for one way or another, they feel like that my material sorry my material like benefit, like there's nothing that's going to be done to change my condition, nothing is not worth it, or I don't want to trust the authorities to deal with my plight or my situation. Like we need to really understand why that's the
Which is a
case.
fair thought. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if people can trust authorities with their plight. Because what are the cops going to do other than
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, we'll take your statement. Yeah, write a report. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if you could put in a manhunt, like you could put in security cam footage, then maybe you have a chance,
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's generally really hard for any of this to be persecuted prosecuted. Like we
Mm-hmm.
just can't do it like effectively. And another thing is like in Asian cultures there's like the saving face type of thing, I hope this isn't still a big thing, but a lot of them would be like, yeah, I'm not going to report it because I feel like there's shame in it. I just don't feel like another thing is the bystander effect. No one's going to help me. I'm going to stand. I'm literally going to be the one asking for help, but no one's going to help me, and I feel bad, but no one's going to pity me. Type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple problems with this scenario, and it just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like I was gonna say earlier, not to interrupt, but I was gonna say earlier that like I think part of the reason that, or like maybe part of the reason that Asians are being targeted is like all of that plays into the racist stereotype that an Asian person is meek. Like they won't fight back. They're like just like the meeker race, I guess, in America. A lot of people still feel that way. The Asians are quiet. They won't speak. They won't talk back. Like like they won't fight back. And so I think when people are like choosing a random target or whatever the hell is going on, they are targeting Asian people, thinking like oh, you're elderly and you're Asian and you're not gonna do anything if I jump you, if I stab you, if I knock you down. And if it's in an Asian area, they might be thinking that no one else is gonna do anything either, because
Mm-hmm.
of
Right.
those like outdated racist stereotypes that exist. Um, like it's crazy trying to apply sense to senseless attacks, but I guess trying to pinpoint reasons, I don't know, like that could play into it. But I don't
Yeah, I
know.
feel like our community has to like strengthen itself and figure out what is the best way to band together but not become a menacing part of society. Like we're the Asian gang now, like we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
I it's funny because I did see another Vox video um of a family who patrols San Francisco's Chinatown,
Mm-hmm.
because they were like, I grew up here, and it just sucks that this is happening to people who would be my grandparents, my uncle, my aunt, stuff like that, and I don't want that happening. And they want to walk the streets with their kids, and tell like shopkeepers like, hey, we're here, like let us know if something were to happen, let us know if you see something. And I see that as like, the vigilante thing, but it does help because you have someone who's trying to go out there and trying to connect and make some kind of network. Because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I this is just my feeling, there isn't a very big like cohesive community in the Asian like cities. um and it's hard for people to find backup in a sense,
Yeah.
That's like there needs to be one right now.
right,
Like
Mhm.
right,
for the purposes of the current climate, like
right.
what's happening.
You
I
were saying,
think
sorry?
I was gonna say, like, even as seeing it as a view as like a Cambodian American, and like how elders in the Cambodian community talk about other Asians in the Cambodian community, I'm sure there's so much infighting. Like you would think, like we perpetrate some fucked up ideas, amongst other Asian folks, and I'm just saying this, like, this is real, like these are some of the things that they would say about certain people behind closed doors and things like that. Like
Right.
we probably said some very very bad shit, or at least were witness to some folks saying really fucked up shit about other Asian groups, and I'm just like,
Right.
what the hell, I think if
I
this
think
doesn't
it's
bring people.
almost human nature to put others down,
Mhm,
because you want to be seen as better. You want to compare yourself. That saying, like, never compare yourself to others, right? You'll find
mhm,
like happiness that way, because otherwise you're not only are you making yourself unhappy, but eventually, yeah, you channel that into hate, and you're like, man, that other Asian group, they're the worst. Like blah blah blah. Let
mhm.
me get other people to be on my side and just hate on them. But neither of you guys are really moving up throughout the ranks. You're just like a
Yeah,
little.
it's not lifting each other.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. We should be helping each other so
Mhm,
that we're seen as a, powerful, strong group in society, and not like, oh, someone that people can pick on. And it's not like that right now.
Yeah, United
mhm,
we stand.
Yeah, it's not like that right now, and it sucks. Like they just look at us, and we don't have a sense of that. They probably don't even know that we infight, but one of the reasons why we're this weak is because of the infighting. It's
mhm.
because we put each other down. But I feel like that's in every race.
Yeah, I was gonna say ethnocentrism
Yeah,
exists in every culture, and
yeah,
it's like more common in some cultures or stronger in some cultures than
right,
others, but it's everywhere. Like
right,
every breed of white.
right,
Yeah.
Plenty of different types of like Asian groups in different communities are gonna like look at other Asian groups and say
right,
like, okay, like
right.
Ha-
we're gonna stay over here. Like,
It takes a special
mhm,
discipline to be looking at other groups and be like, they're not like us. What are their strengths? What are their
yeah,
weaknesses? It's like war. You
mhm,
have to see their strengths, you see their weaknesses, but because we're not fighting them, you shouldn't be exploiting their weaknesses. We should be learning about their strengths. And
mhm,
then you, maybe, if you're a very nice person, would offer insights of your strength to the other side. So then both sides can be like, "Oh wow, we're missing out on this. You're missing out on that. Let's work together, collaborate."
mhm.
And it's not happening. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not realistic because people want to be the best. You want to be number one, and so you put others down. That's just
Mhm.
how it runs. Yeah. And
And
that's
the
why we're not going to be a interstellar species, because America's going to want to be number one, but we know China's going to want to be number one. So
yeah.
it's
And
hard.
it's so stupid because in the realm like of number one, what does that get you?
Right.
You know?
A plaque, a
Mhm,
flag on the
Yeah,
moon,
like
you
the
know?
mhm,
ability to say you're number one. Congrats. Like,
Right.
mhm.
Sorry for
The-
being so
What?
nihilistic,
Well,
but I'm dumbing it down because not a lot of people think about that. I feel like
mhm,
they don't really think about why people don't work together, and I think it's because we want to be. You want to tell yourself I'm better than another person, like the self-worth thing.
Hmm.
But you know you're worth something, but
That's
can't
true.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, can't I mean, if Brian and I, you and I, you have so many strengths, and I would want to learn from you so that
Hmm.
I want to be, I mean, so that I could become as good as you. But I'm not going to be like, oh, I want to know all of Brian's weaknesses so that I could tear him down, you know? Like
Hmm.
I only want to see you succeed, and I would
Hmm.
hope you want to see me succeed, you know? That
Yeah.
type of thing. That's what I wish our communities were like, and
Hmm.
it's not like that right now. And
Yeah.
one day hopefully we could get there, but it like I said earlier, it takes like conscious effort. You literally have to do that because it's so easy to be like, "Oh man, that person's dumb. What they did is dumb. Oh, this podcast sucks. I hate
Yeah.
it." Like you're just flaming. You're not criticizing with
Hmm.
constructive criticism. You know, you're not giving us any feedback, and thus we end up flaming you. You know, we're gonna be like, man, this person is dumb for criticizing us for without giving us feedback, and that's why wars begin. Yes, exactly.
Well, I think there's no data to be gained if the conversation is it says, oh, like you're full tilt like a racist, or like you're full tilt like this person that really doesn't understand this situation. Therefore, whatever you have to say doesn't matter. You know,
Mhm.
like
Well,
I think.
okay, and this is a little interesting tangent.
Okay.
Because of Parler and because of Twitter and
Hmm.
the ban of the POTUS at the time, um,
Hmm.
was that a good thing?
I
We
think.
banned him because of all his inflammatory statements. He wasn't banning people to get maybe on his side, but he wasn't bringing America together. He was
Hmm.
splitting us for sure.
And
But
it happened in for longer than what the January 6th thing happened, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was happening the whole time. It was happening
Yeah.
before he
Yeah,
became
everyone was
Hmm.
like,
president.
wow, never saw this coming for 4 years. Like this built up so
Yeah.
quickly over four
And
the
it's
last
like
four
so
years.
many of his tweets were so like they aged so poorly because he would say things like, "Oh, a true president wouldn't do this," and then he literally does the same thing he was like
Yeah,
mentioning.
Hmm.
like the when Obama was president and there was like a government shutdown and Trump was like, a true president wouldn't let his government shut down.
And it
And
shuts
then he
down
had
like three
he had
times,
yeah.
three
Hmm.
shutdowns.
It's bananas.
Hmm.
So to me, I'm asking you the question
Is it a good thing?
is it a good thing that we censor or yeah, the word should be censored racists or people who are only there to tear us down?
Yeah, I think I see,
Tricky, huh?
it is tricky. I want to believe in the hardest of hearts that people can change,
Hmm.
especially as old as they can be. They can change, and
That's a good one.
um and like there, I guess I believe in that classical Christian ideal that, like, if you lead with kindness or you lead with redemption, like people can have a redemptive moment. It's just really tough when I guess my bias, and I want to set this out right now, like my bias is like I've seen this president as someone that's universally and to a degree that like the most consequential person that put these policies, made this pandemic worse by calling it the Chinese virus, calling it kung flu, not assuring people to say like, hey, we don't want to raise racial put racial attacks on a pedestal,
Right,
like yeah, the word I was looking for, an existential threat to Black and brown communities,
right. Yeah,
um to some degree. I do hope that maybe someday he'll figure out that that was a bad look, these were bad things, separating families at the border was bad,
right,
and I want to hope for that. Like that's the part of me that hopes for redemption for all people, right?
right.
But
It
in the
it's just so
mhm.
mind-boggling that he not only brown, black, Asian, like his statement "America first" was literally just a veil of like you think it's patriotism, but it's racism.
Yeah.
That's
Mass
America
as
first, America
patriotism,
always.
yeah.
right. We want number one to be white America, and that's it. And we're not selling for anything else.
This is a lost nation.
Right, but you say America first because the other statements are so inflammatory. But it comes down to that. Like he led with that idea, and everyone rallied behind it, which is crazy because half our country voted for that. And then
Mhm.
this time around, a little bit less than half the country voted for that. But it's still crazy that it's such a big number. Like what? Like 47 to 53%, like
Mhm.
that type of margins. We're talking about slim margins.
Mhm.
It's crazy. It's crazy because like that means there are that many people out there who believe that what he was saying was the gospel was right, and
Mhm.
they don't believe in what we're discussing right now, working together. They
Mhm.
believe in tearing other people down. And what's sad is that most of them are already down in the dumps. The majority of Republican like constituents are not doing amazing. They're living in poor conditions, and
Mhm.
yet they don't see that as, like, oh man, I want to get out of this. It's more like, man, I really hate those people on the West Coast and East Coast. Like, I just hate them because they're elitist. Yeah, the
And then
coastal
on
elites.
and then on the flip side of that coin, like I'm tired of being the constant like minority, or like being used as a talking point within not just progressive, but like these corporate liberal Democrats that are saying like, oh, we're going to try to help the people, and like it's tone deaf when you realize they're getting funding by these multi-billion-dollar corporations. And like be mad about Gavin Newsom about skirting COVID restrictions and going to the French Laundry, right? But
Hmm.
I'm also angry that he's doing that on top of meeting donors that donated millions of dollars to his campaign.
Hmm.
Like it's like what at what point do you do something back to the like give something back to your constituents, give something back to the people that voted you in the beginning. And
I
so
think that's ideal, and I
mhm,
don't know if there's ever been an elected official. I mean, maybe there are that have done that. Like they've been so selfless, and they once they get there, it's only about their constituents, and they live off $1 a day type of guy. Like
mhm,
who's only about that. Most of them get up there, they find power, and they do what's necessary to keep them in office.
mhm,
Yeah, and it's not like they're not doing it to hurt their constituents. They forget about them. I think
mhm,
they forget about them. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna become the governor of California, and then all of a sudden I hate Californians. It's more so like, oh, I want to stay in my position. How do I
mhm,
get more money so that whoever runs against me loses next time, so I get to keep this chair. I
mhm,
get to stay in this office.
Yeah, like personally, I'm pissed at a lot of Newsom's decisions, but I also recognize that this is one of the most unparalleled, like difficult situations that this country has seen, especially with the former leadership in the president's office. Like, oof, what a
mhm,
complicated situation. And like you said earlier, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
Close it
mhm,
down, people are pissed. Open it up, people are pissed. But, like, yeah, personally, yes, I'm not a fan of a lot of the things he did. But
mhm,
I also did appreciate a lot of the things he did at the time he did them,
Right.
mhm.
But,
Right. And
like, what a multifaceted situation.
right,
Yeah.
right. And the thing is, he's just human, like
Yeah.
he's gonna do things like go to a French Laundry. He's gonna meet with multi-million dollar donors, and that's to be expected of a politician. I just don't
Mhm,
see that as like, oh, like it's the first time politicians did that. What
mhm.
is the first time seeing is like someone flying out of Texas to Cancun during a state emergency.
And
Yes, that's
blaming his kids all over it too.
Yeah,
right.
that was so
Yeah.
That was so like, what if he did that without his kids? That would have been so funny.
Someone said, like, people, everyone was, well, what should he have done? What could he have done? And someone was like, he could have handed out paper towel rolls after the crisis.
Right.
I was like, but
a,
yeah.
a reference to his idol.
Yeah.
I feel like there are way worse people out there than Newsom, and
Yeah,
we we like to nitpick because we want our elected officials to represent us, to reflect us.
Right.
But it's just, like I was saying, the worst case is that they forget about the constituents. They become something else. And I don't think he has become something else. I think the others may have become something else.
Yeah.
But
Well,
there's hope yet, I feel like.
yeah, there is a reason why a lot of our elected officials, their average age is almost 60. You know, like they stay in power for over time. And like one of the criticisms that I believe Nancy Pelosi had, leading up to the election is like, why haven't you like pruned and helped lead the younger generation of the Democratic Party to become, these higher positions in government? And like, I think that's a very valid criticism. Like,
right, yeah.
This may sound ageist. It's like there's only a certain amount of time you can do that job. Bernie has done it for the longest time, apparently, but like there is a certain amount of time that people have done this.
Remember that video of Pelosi when all the kids went to her office to,
she had to argue with them
for climate change. She was such a dick about it.
Yeah,
she's like, I've been doing this job for a long.
She basically like condescendingly, patronizingly, and said, "You don't know how things work."
Yeah,
and I do.
Even hear them out. She was like, I know what I'm doing.
Right,
job.
which is a bad look, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think, okay, well, what are our options here? What is the solution? And a lot of people have talked about term limits and number of years and stuff that they can maximum serve for. And I feel like that's huge because that means. Yeah, that's huge because like people are going to be like, okay, well, if I'm going to end here soon, but my allegiance is to this ideal, this party, whatever it may be, progressives, conservatives, whatever it may be, I better start telling the next person down what our game plan is. So you have this ladder of secession, and everyone's trying their best to improve upon your idea, and that's how you get a better. I feel like that's how you get things moving because it's not just you sitting there and be like, I'm the top dog and I've been here for 30, 40 years. And then you die. And then the next person might come in with no idea what to do and they don't have like the face that you had. And so they lose out on the connections, that you may have, or the person whoever the elected official was, who had all the connections with these other companies and donors and stuff. I feel like term limits would be huge. It would be. I feel like it would definitely help, both sides of the parties, America as a whole, hopefully.
I know it's almost been an hour and a half at this point, but I did want to at least say that in terms of the question you answered and asked of me about Trump's Twitter getting banned and like getting banned on Facebook and like the meme of like, hey, what's my password for MySpace? Those companies are private and they have the right to do that, but I also recognize they also keep the Twitter accounts of other people that have done atrocious acts against each other, dictators. I think Bolsonaro is on there and like he's done really crazy shit when it comes to Brazil and like burning down the rainforest in the name of like factory farming essentially. So like we got to recognize, okay, so if we are going to do this to this type of person in the context of an American context, like what's to say if we're going to do that for other countries? Like how are we going to be equitable if we find somebody that is so abhorrent, right? How are we going to be equitable in the punishment? And then what is the process for them to I wouldn't say necessarily redeem themselves, but like to find a pathway to redemption or find a pathway for understanding, because I don't know, maybe I'm still hopeful to some degree that there are going to be people that will understand. Like they may not completely, redeem themselves, but I guess I still believe it. And I'm still young enough that I can believe it, I guess.
Yeah, the saying that comes to mind is damned if you do, damned if you don't, because we let someone like Donald Trump uncensored. We let him keep talking. He's only going to keep dividing. It's not like he's going to turn around and what you're saying is redeem himself and be like, let's all come together and hug and let's beat coronavirus together, which
Mhm.
may have gotten him, the 2020 election if he just decided,
Just did that.
if he
Yeah.
did anything, yeah, and
Mhm.
actually got people to come together. But he didn't. He only wanted to split us more apart to the point where he called everything in the election rigged, and it was stolen, and he incited a insurrection
Mhm.
like that. It blows my mind that they didn't convict him. They did not charge.
Yeah.
They
They
charged
voted
him
to
with
acquit him.
impeachment, but they didn't convict it. They didn't push it through the House, and that's just, it blows my mind. But it's crazy. Can a person be redeemed? I'm sure they can, but I don't think he would have. Like,
Mhm.
you can say like, oh, I want to see a bad person turn good in a sense, like I want to
Mhm.
give them the benefit of the doubt, but will they?
Mhm.
Also, in my opinion, a person can redeem themselves without their platform. Like,
Right.
To give somebody that platform to continue spewing hate until they decide one day to be good, like, I don't think that's right.
Right. But
Mhm.
it does come down to like does it limit their
Freedom of speech don't mean shit. I don't want to hear
right?
it.
Mhm.
I feel very strongly.
Yeah, they can still post whatever
Yeah.
wherever else. Like,
Yeah,
it's
no
not
one's
like
stopping you from saying things. They're just not promoting it on their platform, which they have a right to do.
Right.
To not
I'm pretty sure he has a bat phone for Fox News.
That man has a mad burners. I don't know if you remember or if anyone saw it, but like the day after he got banned, all the accounts that were like, not Donald Trump. It was so funny.
Oh yeah.
It was like the profile picture is like him with a mustache. It's so funny. But people, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. No, don't. Frankie and I have this conversation a lot. People bring up the Constitution where it's not applicable, and
Correct.
It drives me nuts.
Right.
I wonder if I'm too glib for this conversation.
No, I'm just too strong feeling.
No, it could be both. I guess I'm just very hopeful because I work in the place I work at because I I I want there to be a place where they won't ever be defined by their past, and for them being young and for them being like high school students, right? Like
I
I don't.
agree with that.
Mhm.
It's more of a controlled situation because
Mhm.
they are your I guess clients,
Mhm.
your students. They're not affecting an election,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? They are their own microcosm. They have their own environment. What
Mhm.
they do likely only affects a couple people at most around them.
Right.
It's really their life that is going to be changed. Whereas what we're talking about is this one person who's, whatever he does, there's going to be thousands of people who revere his word as gospel.
Global interference, like it's like the difference between him and Bolsonaro being on the platform is like does Brazil impact the global scale as much as what the leader of the United States does? And I think that's the logic applied there. It's like banning.
Uh-oh.
I turned off again.
Oh.
I don't know why.
Is
Banning dot, yeah.
Because he has the capacity to impact so many things, whereas like people will see it as other countries or other leaders having less of an impact.
Mhm.
And like I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think anyone should be allowed to just spew hate speech and do shit. But like, I think that is where it comes in. The fact that they can't have that sort of influence on their platform after a certain point, because I feel like you do become culpable, like at least a little bit.
Right. So I mean, no, like you're not too glib. I believe you're applying it to different scale, and
Mhm.
that's why it's not applicable in a sense, because you want to give your students the benefit of the doubt that they can change, that they can better themselves and not be defined by their past, which is awesome. We want that. We want to provide them with all the tools and support so that they can achieve a better position than they were at the start, but it's not the same when you're talking about literally the president of the United States.
Yeah.
Even personal reform on an individual scale, but at a certain point, it does become like
Right.
interviewing things
It's
above
more
an
dangerous
individual
at that
person.
point.
No.
Right. Right.
I guess I never like that was something in the back of my mind, like the fact that yeah, when you become the president of the United States, you become the president of the so-called free world, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I had that in the back of my head, but I guess I was leaning more towards that, like the redemption arc, the under like folks that can, I guess, have some profound like notion that like, oh yeah, maybe this wasn't like the
Yeah.
most
I think
best
we grew
case.
up with like movies and stuff, and we want to believe that there is a redeeming moment that a main character will
Hmm.
encounter a crucible, and they will become better because of it. He has not become better through
Hmm.
two impeachments. He
Hmm.
has not realized his problems. So no, I don't think he will ever like get to the point where he will be redeeming himself. He just thinks that these are like, maybe to him these are like his, like like Rocky success story. It's like these hurdles he has to go through so he
Hmm.
could be number one. He has to fight Russia at the end, like
Yeah. I guess that's fair. I guess
like
I guess
in
that's
his
the
head it's a
narrative.
different movie, and we're thinking like, oh, he's gonna redeem. No, he's like time to go. I'm gonna run up the steps of the Capitol.
It's hard to say somebody can redeem themselves if they don't see that they're doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
Right.
If he believes he's in the right for the rest of his life, and there's never going to be a point where he says, I'm wrong and I need to change.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
70 million people support that shit, so why would he change?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think Callie, that I think you pointed out something in my that we were talking about in our conversation. It's like, I think to a degree we need to like have a long hard look at ourselves, like as a nation or as a population, and just say like, okay, what are we gonna tolerate? What are we gonna tolerate, and what are we not gonna tolerate?
Yeah.
Is this president that incited an insurrection? Are we going to tolerate that? Like more than likely than not, we won't.
Yeah, a term that got thrown around a lot was, like, after all this happened, after he got banned and everything, was the paradox of tolerance, where you tolerate everything until the point where you're tolerating intolerance, and intolerance wins out of that situation.
Right.
100% of the time, it's going to be intolerance that wins. Which is why it has to be stopped at a point. You can't tolerate hate speech. You can't tolerate the wishing of violence. There's like things like that shouldn't be tolerated.
Right.
Yeah.
I think beyond what you were describing, is like we don't need to look at ourselves and be like, oh, okay, like what can we tolerate? What can't we tolerate? Like, it's more about what we had discussed earlier. We need to educate the other side and learn from the other side, like why do they think the way they think, and hopefully they can see our side and why we think the way we think and why we support certain things. And it comes down to I was reading an article about why House Republicans are objectifying or objecting the stimulus bill, right? They're like, no one's voted yes on their side, and actually 2 Democrats also voted no to the stimulus bill. And I was like, well, what's going on? And I'm reading about it, and it's crazy because I also know that a lot of Republican states are in dire need of this support, but they read it and they're like, oh, you know what? Like, this number is so big, and it's really to help blue states recover better because they closed earlier. And since they closed their states earlier, they have a higher deficit. And so this number is so big, it only helps blue states. And I'm like, but even if the blue states get helped, the red states get helped even more so because they didn't close as early, right? So they have an even lower deficit. So they benefit even more from the stimulus. Like, your constituents are starving. They're out of work. They need this money. They need this stimulus, and they're against it. And I'm like, how can you be so like tone deaf in a sense? Like, it boggles the mind.
It's like being against your own self-interest almost.
Right.
And it's
I get it. Like, fiscal responsibility is important. You can't just like like literally print money, because that's
Mm-hmm.
how we're going to become a third world country. The inflation is just going to skyrocket. We're going to have so much money flying around, but it's going to be all worthless. It's all going to be worth very
But
little.
but the thing about the whole like the deficit hawk notion of like like it's too much of a price tag, 1.9 trillion, right? Well, we're already in debt at 200 something trillion dollars,
Right.
and like you're gonna worry about 1.9 trillion when we
Right. It's a drop in the bucket. Yeah.
yeah
At that point.
yeah and this would like fundamentally change the like material condition of many people, and you're gonna complain about 1.9 trillion on top of 200 something trillion dollars
Mhm.
in a deficit. And so
Like
I
I
just thought,
want to that
yeah.
that that is such a good point, and I want to hear from their side why they think it matters,
Hmm.
because maybe they do have a point, but
Hmm.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing why us passing this bill would no, like us passing a stimulus, like why would it be so
Hmm.
detrimental? Like other than you thinking, oh, it will only help blue states more because they shut down earlier and thus they have a bigger budget deficit versus a red state that didn't shut down as early and thus it only helps the blue. And I'm like, but if you get that same amount of money, then you're gonna get a huge amount boosted. Like it just doesn't make sense. You need help. Let's get money to the people. Let's restart America, recover America.
Actually, there's some lawmakers. I believe Mitch McConnell said something like this, and I've seen other Republicans say things like this. They said like, "Oh, we can't give more than 1,400. Like I'm worried to give 1,400 because people won't want to get back to work."
Right.
And
Yeah.
everyone's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like 1,400 isn't changing people's lives. They're just
Right.
barely able to pay rent.
Right.
That's so out of touch. That's so crazy out of touch. You're gonna retire on $1,400? Like what the hell?
Yeah.
That's
There's
crazy.
I don't. The biggest problem is that they're just so selfish. They just
Hmm.
only
So
see
out of touch. They have
right.
no idea what regular Americans face.
Right.
Hmm.
And we're on the side that does the research. We look at other countries, we see how their welfare programs are working and
Hmm.
how they're supporting their society. Like how does France support it? How does Sweden? How does like all these other countries, they're doing something to help their workers and their society not need to go back to work and face, these this virus,
Hmm.
and thus they're able to reopen a lot earlier. They're able
Hmm.
to be like, okay, yeah, we supported them with a higher amount of unemployment. They didn't need to come in dangerous conditions. The virus load is much lower now, and we're feeling pretty good.
Countries have basically eradicated
And
COVID.
Yeah,
yeah, in some cases like enacted like emergency universal basic income for the course
right,
of
right.
like the
Which I
pandemic
feel
for
like
them.
that should be a no-brainer at this point. It's not like we're lazy, and it's just I get the fear that, oh, no one's gonna work again, but no, people need to work to still pay for like rent, food.
I want to point out for how fucked up the whole tying benefits to unemployment. We have people, using fraud to get that money from taxpayers.
Yeah.
If you found a way to just like like I wouldn't say decentralize, but like take away the barriers and just say, hey, I don't care who you are or what you do. Here's some money to get you through this situation.
Yeah.
Tying it through unemployment was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I think. It helped
Especially
me
with
out.
how the unemployment so completely overrun.
Hmm.
People who do need money can't get it because they can't contact the unemployment office. It's ridiculously. It's just so. It's so poorly thought out. Like it's crazy. It's terrible that so many people are going without money that they need because they actually are unemployed and can't feed themselves, their families, etc. Just because they can't get in touch, like they can't get somebody on the phone, they can't get someone to respond to their emails. Like what are they supposed to do? Can't go there in person because all the offices are closed. Like what do you do?
Hmm.
And then other people are getting it that don't need it.
Yeah, or using fraud to that also exists too. I want to acknowledge that that is also happening, but yeah.
This country, am I right, guys?
Yes, avocado. The country.
Best
We are
country, right?
yes. We are obsessed of your toast.
Yes. Very good
So my
toast.
Dunkin' is offering black toast or avocado toast, and I'm like, Dunkin'?
Trying to get the millennials there.
Yeah, that's the reason why we can afford houses, right? Is that why?
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently. All right, so I think we should close up because I know that a lot, like, my family.
We talked about a lot tonight.
Yeah, I
Covered a
think.
lot of bases.
Yeah, I think this would also prompt another visit too. I think with you and Callie being on the same screen, or no, I meant like you and actual
Avocado.
avocado. Yeah,
Yes.
a live avocado.
Next time
On
I'll find a way to make a mask or something.
You'll wear an avocado mask. No, yeah, thank you for having us on your podcast.
Mhm.
This was really good. I actually came up with a lot of stuff that I was very worried about talking about this, but it was actually good that like I dug deep and I was like, you know what, these thoughts kind of make sense, and I kind of want to voice them. Um,
Mhm.
I really hope we're not estranging too much of your audience. But I feel like
Mhm.
your audience should know about what other sides there are to an argument or even to a basic situation. Why?
Or start being very reflective and
Yeah,
leaning into other authors that have thought about this before. Like
right.
I read James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and it to me it was somebody that was in a search of meaning in terms of what it means to be black and Christian and what it means to be black and Muslim, like
Hmm.
really exploring that and what does it mean for a community to value one over the other.
Hmm.
You're getting this guy that was born from a Christian context, but because he was gay, he was like he had to step away from this belief because that his belief didn't value him as a person. But you
Hmm.
also have this other point where there's this Muslim contingent that supported many people, but also still on that same frame because he was LGBTQ, he could not identify with each other, but he was at least within the circles to examine what it meant
Right,
to be one or the other.
right.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's deep.
Hmm.
I'm just
Yeah, analyzing your identity and the way you fit into like your place in the world is always really difficult.
And for folks that know me, of the work I do and got this far, just know that it's easy to blame each other. It's harder to deep down be very reflective and
Yes.
why you feel the things you feel.
Mhm.
So I think if we take that extra step to say, why is it that I grew up in this household that didn't value black and brown, individuals, or why did I grew up in this household that if something were to happen to me as an Asian American, like how, like, why is it good to not say that these things happen to us? You know,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, I think it's another message is love yourself,
Mm.
but also don't love yourself too much. Like you shouldn't only be thinking me. You should be loving
Mhm.
yourself. Know that you have self-worth. Ask for help and find help if you need
Mhm.
help. If you're having like those bad thoughts, and I mean, this is whole like mental health issue that we're not gonna open that one, but we're just like we're glancing at it. We see the
Mhm.
can of worms, and we were like, okay, yeah. So if you need help, go find help. But really, there's people like us.
Mhm.
I'm a dentist, and I have patients who open up to me, and they tell me things, and I tell them what I can tell them from my perspective. And
Mhm.
hopefully, Brian, you're able to help your students out in your field, because they can only grow. They can
Mhm.
you only can hope for their success.
Yeah. So thank you for being on a long podcast. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and do all the beautiful things. And please stay safe and be good to each other.
Hit
All
that
right.
thumbs up. Yeah, move it up.
How much did that cost, by the way?
$20. It's worth it. It's really soft.
Okay.
It's quite large.
And you also got a baby one, apparently.
We've had the baby one for like 2 years.
Correct. We've had it for a while. I was like, I want a big avocado, and we found it on Amazon for $20. It was great.
Yeah. It's a holy moly situation.
Yeah, holy moly guacamole. Okay.